Hello, everyone, and thanks for coming. Just have a few things some housekeeping stuff to get out of the way. First, as a reminder, this session, before you ask, because I know you will be recorded. All registrants will have access to the recording. We're going to get through as many questions as time allows. I want you guys to take advantage of, there's a poll here. And I'm really interested to see what we come out of this with in terms of the results. And I've just popped it up on the screen here. How well do you think your current sales org enables Black sales pros? I see some folks have already voted there, so be sure to take a look at that. Also, I want to thank Ashley and Casey with Other Side of Sales for lending us this platform. It's really important. They're doing important work with this, along with the state of sales culture. The state of sales survey that they're doing. So remember to take that survey as well, so that your voice is counted, so that we have something to point to that is measurable when we take action to solve the types of problems that we're going to be talking about today. I also want to thank our sponsor, VanillaSoft, who's demonstrated a commitment to supporting the change that we're trying to accomplish here by donating to the charity 7Cs, which is an organization, I posted about this yesterday, that helps youth in North Florida avoid low graduation rates and high out-of-school suspension rates through fitness, athletics, and leadership training. So there's a donate button there if you're interested in supporting that organization. And if you're enjoying the conversation, y'all know me, I do social. So if you're enjoying the conversation, please do post about it, talk about your takeaways, live tweet it, do what you do. We're gonna have fun, and we're gonna come away with some actionable things, if nothing else, some insights to help put all of this in perspective and start to really take action. So before we get into introducing this lovely panel that we have here, I'm going to talk just once, besides asking the questions, and then we'll get into it. In a sales career that spans more than a decade, I have been the only Black woman on pretty much every team that I have ever been on. And this is not a result of, some mean people who were just trying to make my life difficult. This is a result of our country's half-hearted approach to dismantling white supremacy and our failure to act intentionally against the enduring effects of systemic racism. Now, you've heard these terms lately a lot, right? White supremacy, systemic racism. I want you to know this. These are not buzzwords. These are not Black people problems. These are the foundations on which this country was built. For that reason, it is at best naive and at worst destructive to imagine that those ills wouldn't affect who has access to and who has experiences of belonging and inclusion on a sales team. Those disparities are real. And what we have before us is not simply an opportunity, but a moral and professional imperative to change this. We have before us a once-in-a-generation shot to meaningfully impact the culture and the society that we live in. And the good news is, as salespeople and leaders, we've been building that muscle all along. Think about it. The energy that drives success on your sales team comes from your commitment to solving problems and a shared belief that you can change the world. We're taught to believe that about the products we sell and about the leaders that we follow. What would happen if we applied that energy to this problem? What if we decided to hold ourselves accountable and invest in disrupting and transforming the way things have been into the way that they should be? So today, we'll talk about why this is so critical, and we'll discuss some steps to begin to take action for equality. Thanks for listening. And now we get into our lovely panelists. I'm just going to go around and have you all introduce yourselves. And we will start with you, Galem.
Hi, everyone. My name's Galem. I work as an account executive for a fintech company, and I focus on solving payment issues in the education world. Other than that, I'm also extremely active on LinkedIn. So a few of you who are here probably seen me around. If you haven't, connect with me there. I love building communities, and I'm part of Rev Genius, which is all about building a community. And there are a few people here today who are with the same team, so the same group of people. And, other than that, I love to work and empower, women in sales, Black women in sales. I've been in sales myself for 1.5 years now, going into 2. And there's been some challenges with that, being the only Black woman on the team and in the office at that. So I'll move on to the next person introducing themselves.
All right, go ahead, Chantel.
Hi, everyone. My name is Chantel George. I am an ad sales account executive, and I'm also the founder of Sisters in Sales, a 2,500 member organization for Black and Brown women in sales. I have the privilege and honor of meeting up with Nikki in Austin a few years back when launching this organization. I've just seen tremendous growth in the past few years, which is an indicator for me that Black women in sales need support, encouragement, and sponsorship.
Thank you. Yes, we met in person. She was so nice. She was in town trying to catch a plane and set aside like 15 minutes for me just to meet for coffee because I was looking for community. So thank you for that. And thank you again for being here, Chantel. And now my man, Blake Hudson, the rising star.
Thanks so much, Nikki. And also just thanks for having me here today. My name is Blake Hudson. I'm from Chicago, Illinois. And I had a career in politics, career in higher education, and have transitioned in sales a few years back. I made that transition due to a company called Victory Lab, sales boot camp. And truly, they fundamentally altered the trajectory of my career. So much so that I now have the opportunity to work for them, employee 8. And, I'm really proud of the work that they're doing. My passion, and kind of speaking to why I'm here today, is for helping people clarify their identity and their purpose. When people know who they are and what they're doing, they're really hard to stop. So I think that today, I'll say I don't have every answer, but I have my perspective and a willingness to hear others. And I think that mindset allows for a great dialogue to happen. So thanks for having me today.
Sweet. Thank you. So I've got some questions here that we're going to go through. Do feel free to ask questions in the little chat section. I can't promise I'll keep up with them as fast as you'd like, but I'll try and get to a couple of those as well. But the way that I have crafted these questions is around some common statements that I've heard made recently about what's going on. And we're just going to talk about, what we think about those statements, where we think they come from, and just address them head on. So this first question, some of you already touched on it, and I'm just going to throw the question out there, and whoever feels like, this is one you want to catch, go ahead and catch it. But some of you already touched on why this is so important to you. I'm really interested to hear, how systemic racism and white supremacy have affected you, particularly at work and in your sales role. We'll start with you, Blake.
So if I'm being honest, the idea of white supremacy is something that is relatively new to me. I always thought, that word might be a little strong. It was just reserved for Nazis and Klansmen. What I've come to understand is that it is it's a mindset that kind of pervades a lot of the aspects of our society. Being in politics, I've had that experience of seeing how it works itself into our government and our systems. And so just wanted to say right off the top, it's not it's not just reserved for Nazis and Klansmen. And that is like the height of it, but it doesn't have to go there. Sometimes it can be as subtle as making something the standard, and it doesn't have to be. I think the biggest way I can speak to this is just that. Walking into a place and not seeing anyone like yourself, I mean, that's one thing. But not feeling as though you belong, that's another thing. And when that sort of system is perpetuated for the sake of one group and at the detriment of another, that's supremacy. That's as simple as saying this group is ahead of this other. And I put in my post kind of mentioning this, that, diversity is having a seat at the table, and inclusion is having a voice, and belonging is that voice being heard. When your voice isn't heard, when you don't have a voice and you haven't even really been invited to the table, but other people have, that's a system that needs to change. It doesn't benefit myself. It doesn't benefit anybody, actually. So that's my broad experience with it. I can get into specifics later, but I just wanted to speak to white supremacy as a term and kind of unpackage that a little bit.
For sure. Thank you for that.
I would also jump in on that. So I'm first generation American. My family are from the Caribbean, and they conditioned into me at a very young age to stay within these confines, which, to your point, is the white supremacy confines. Pursue a medical degree, pursue a law degree, because that's what will be safe. That will guarantee you security and make sure that you're not put in an uncomfortable situation. And to your point about white supremacy just being woven into systems, if you don't know what other careers are out there that can benefit you and benefit your family, and if leaders are not reaching you where you're at to help you bridge those gaps, we will always be shut out from the sales world, which is extremely lucrative and can have a severely impactful knockdown effect if we are not involved. And furthermore, on that point, it's not that we as Black people aren't talented, aren't entrepreneurial, aren't go-getters. Nielsen reported 2 or 3 years ago that the fastest growing entrepreneurship group within America are Black women. So it's very conflicting and quite obvious that we should be in these seats. So I believe, to your point, Nikki, it's a company's due diligence to meet us where we're at.
Absolutely.
Very well said. I
Absolutely.
agree with you. I feel that 100%. I think that's one of my biggest frustrations is, not having the same equal opportunities, even in the smaller ways, right? Like not getting the same amount of opportunities like your peers are getting, regardless of how much you advocate for that or how much you try to put yourself in a position where, constantly proving yourself, like I can do this. And then if you mess up once, like, that's the end of it. So there's that constant fear behind that as well.
Yeah, for sure. That's, for me, one of the things that I think has had the most profound effect is the feeling that I am representing the group of Black people for a number of reasons. A, because who gets to say what is and is not representative of Black people? But that's to a lesser degree. The number one thing that scares me is if I'm conscious of the fact, and this has happened as I started at the top more often than not, if I'm conscious of the fact that this is an organization that has not hired other Black people or other Black women, then it puts this pressure on my performance, because it's easy for me to feel like, well, if I mess up, then they're never hiring any more Black women.
Yep.
And not even if I mess up performance-wise, right? If I don't make them comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the thing that you walk around with, at least I have, in these environments. What I don't want to do, though, I don't want this to be, where we tell war stories, but I do think it's important that people understand exactly what those conditions feel like as best as we can communicate them. So thank you guys for putting that out there. We've got a question from the attendees I'm going to go ahead and ask real quick. It comes from Alex Smith. And he's asking, what are some examples that we've seen of half-hearted attempts to create change that companies are doing? And what's the difference, in your opinion, of a half-hearted attempt and a genuine intent on execs to create a change? You want to take that one, Blake?
I'm going first all day today. All right.
Where you are on my screen.
Thinking about this a little bit deeper. Once upon a time, we used to go outside. That was a thing. I used to play basketball back in that golden age. And while doing so, I tore a ligament in my wrist. And I bring that up to say, I have a cast and I had surgery. And underneath this cast, something uncomfortable is happening. But I'm healing because of that. Can you imagine if I tore that ligament, the doctor gives me the surgery, and then they just send me on my way? No stitches, no bandage, no cast. He tells me, you're better now. We had surgery. That's what I liken this situation to, with companies trying to provide a surface level solution for a far deeper problem. You have to be uncomfortable to fix a problem that is uncomfortable. The solution cannot be comfortable if the problem is uncomfortable. And so I see a lot of companies who try and have the surgery and send the people on their way, not realizing that you got to put a cast on that thing. It's going to be uncomfortable for you, for the people you're trying to help, possibly for your customers. But that's the price that you pay to increase diversity. And that's the price you pay to be better. Diversity makes us all better. I think if there's one thing I get home today, it's that diversity improves all of our experience, all of our perspective, and it raises the standards for everyone. So I would just say simply that you have to be uncomfortable. You cannot put a picture up on a website. You cannot put a name for a group. You have to do the hard work of having uncomfortable conversations and acquiescing, both groups. So I hope that makes sense.
No, it definitely does.
That was a great analogy, Blake.
Yeah, I think all of us are kind of spellbinded by it.
Yeah.
I knew I was going to have to talk about my cat at some point, but
Love it.
You want to add anything?
I would say that, I was listening to a segment on MSNBC about how when companies don't hit sales goals or marketing goals or anything that's very cut and dry, the person just gets fired maybe after some time of not hitting those goals. We don't apply the same black and white structure to diversity. And what I've also found is when there are diversity quotas, most companies will meet exactly that and not higher than that. So there's a lot of nuance when it comes to diversifying a corporate or small business or technology company, what have you. We just need to get that business case solidified and penetrated within an organization deep enough so that people feel like there's accountability. So many times this has gone on where companies are getting away without providing big enough budgets for ERGs, without going over diversity quotas. And I think about this, and I brought up in another small group discussion, when I think about segregation and I think about where we've come as a country, if it weren't for actual court cases, schools would be segregated today. That just goes to show you how much pressure needs to be applied. There's no corporate accountability for lack of Black and brown people in their organization. There's no slap on the wrist. The only thing that comes out of that is a PR scandal, which we are now seeing is directly linked to business growth. So I like to think about what businesses should not wait for someone to come out and fine them, hypothetically, for not having diverse groups. They should just take it upon themselves to want to change that and be a thought leader, which apparently should align with their corporate vision in the first place.
You touched on a lot of stuff that I've got questions related to, as far as what the actual steps are that people can take is a huge one. How to attract more Black people, more brown people, more women into this profession. And that's kind of a question that I think someone's asking here in the attendees. It says, sales as a profession has historically been elitist and clubby for everyone. It is always described as breaking into sales and not making a career choice to start and grow in sales. How does this foundational paradigm become exacerbated with any minority groups based on color? And then there's a follow-up as far as what we can do to make a positive change. All right, I'll come to you, Galem.
Yeah, I was hoping you would. It's interesting. I definitely heard that before too, like from other people's stories, that they just accidentally got into sales. It wasn't a choice for them, right? And I was just having a conversation about this this past weekend, because I was asked that question, like, how did you get into sales? You know, what's your story? And my story is that it was actually a choice. It was a deliberate choice. I didn't accidentally fall into it. Did I choose to work in fintech? No. But I did choose. I was in a place in my last semester of college, and I was at Dunkin' Donuts, and I was getting coffee, and I see this guy behind me, this man, and I recognize him. And then I kept looking at him, like a little bit creepy, you know, just keep looking at someone, not really knowing where you know them from, but you recognize them well enough to keep looking. And that was me. Mm-hmm. So eventually I broke the ice, and I was like, I'm sorry that I'm staring at you, but I really recognize you. I don't know where from, but let's figure this out. So we spent a couple of minutes figuring it out. And then at that time, I had just planned, like, do I continue to stay in the career choice that I thought I was going to do, which was HR and recruiting, or do I try sales, because it's something I've always been curious about? And it was at that point where I made that deliberate choice of, like, you know what, I'm going to try out sales. I'm going to try it for a year, see if it's a fit for me, and then I'll take it from there. So that's what I did a year and a half ago. And I'm so happy I made that choice to just try it out for a little bit, see how that would work. And then from there on, you know, make a decision whether it will be a good fit or not.
But I think that in this story, right, that's sort of the spirit of the question that was asked is, yep, if your story is, I happen to be in sales, and my story is the same thing, and, you know, so many other people who are in it, if we know that everybody is falling into this accidentally, right, or most of us are, and we know that by the numbers, right, there's only 7% of us in B2B tech. Black people, I mean, when I say us, most of the time, that's what I mean. Sometimes I mean women. Anyway, but there's only 7% of us in this industry. So we're not accidentally falling into this most of the time. If we know that, and we know that teams perform better when they are diverse, and we know that a sales career, because of the high potential for return on the time you invest in it, can provide upward mobility for people from historically underrepresented groups. How then have we accepted for all of this time, oh, we just didn't have a diverse pool of candidates, right? It goes back to Chantel's point about just not having the same level of standard for an accountability for how we will treat this problem as we do with other problems across an organization. And so that's another question that I had for you guys, just about, you know, so many times I've heard over the past few weeks, folks saying things like, I really didn't know it was like that. I just need to educate myself. And while I'm all about people educating themselves, I think that's necessary. I have to do it. I get to do it. My question to you all is, what do you think about that? How do you feel about folks who have lived in this country, right? We're in America, for instance, and saw Eric Garner 2 years ago, and saw what happened to Tamir Rice, and know the history of this country. What do you think about people, those same well-educated, well-informed people, often saying that they just need more information when it comes to this? They just have to educate themselves. I'll tell you, and you can probably tell in my tone, it puts me off. Like, I'm empathetic. I listen and I help where I can. But part of the problem is this people still claiming ignorance. That's as real as raw as I can give it to you. What do y'all think about this?
Well, can we just clarify before we jump into it? So are you saying that you're looking at this from a perspective of other in your shoes, right? Like, I'm not in the US anymore, I'm in London, UK. Right. But for you, you're saying that people in America who are from America are still being ignorant about this, or naive, or whatever it is.
Yeah, I think, and I think this happens all. The anti-Black sentiment is a global problem, for sure, Galem. Yep. And I don't mean to discount your experience or the experience of other Black people around the world. I feel connection to those people. But because the mistakes made and the terrors and a lot of the things that have happened in American history have been so obvious and so well documented. It's a lot more difficult for me to accept when people say they didn't know or they just need to educate themselves. Right. So I'm asking what you guys think about that.
Hi. Can I chime in here? And forgive me if I'm back a question, but I wanted to speak to the access to sales. So I said we got to be uncomfortable. So for me, this uncomfortability is this. I think the reason why at its core, why it's this like kind of thing you fall into rather than a thing that you're, introduced to, is mediocre sales reps. I think mediocre sales professionals, they want to think of sales as this like alchemy, this like magic, this like thing that you can only do if you know the certain things. And the reality is sales is uniquely human. Can you listen? Can you empathize? Can you ask great questions? Because if you can do those things, you can succeed in sales. And we do those things every day. A mom's trying to convince her child to eat their broccoli. A teacher's trying to convince their students to listen. A retail clerk is trying to get someone to purchase something that they need. We're all doing sales. But to get into sales, you need some special magical lightsaber. I don't know. And that's just not the case. And so that's one thing. That's the why. I wanted to talk really quickly about the what, and then I'll pass the mic. It requires us to show people what it takes. So the company I work for, Victory Lab, we are all about democratizing the sales profession, meaning we want to make this work as accessible as possible for people. Okay, that's one thing. And giving people the skills they need to succeed and thrive, right? The other thing is representation. If you ask a young Black kid, name me your top 3 favorite basketball players. Oh, easy. MJ, Kobe, LeBron. Name me your top 3 favorite musicians. Oh, LeBron, Jay-Z, Beyonce, Travis Scott. Easy. Actors, Will Smith, Denzel, Halle Berry. Easy. Who are your 3 favorite doctors? Who are your 3 favorite lawyers? Who are your 3 favorite VPs of sales? Because I'll be honest, 6 months ago, I didn't know them. I didn't know any. Now I know the Kevin Dorseys. Now I know someone like a Morgan Ingram. Now I know these individuals who are thriving in this work. But if I don't see it, how am I supposed to be like it? So I just think mediocre sales reps kind of keep a wall up on this profession because it threatens them. And I think that representation is going to be important for people to enter this workforce and thrive. They have to see someone like themselves succeeding.
Absolutely. Anybody else want to jump in on either point, the question I was asking or the point that Blake was just talking about? If not, we can move on.
I think that a lot of companies put a really unrealistic expectation on Black and brown sellers. Certain companies expect Black and brown sellers to have this specific type of corporate experience, work at the top FANG companies, have had all of these great quotas when they weren't even given the opportunity to start and to really create their resume. And so recruiters will discount them without even giving them a phone screen. And that's very frustrating to me because, to your point, Blake, we have all of these experiences where we're selling ideas to one another, where we're starting our own side hustles, where we're doing everything we need to do. Yet companies look at us with a very short-sighted lens. And they don't want to meet us where we're at, pinpoint some of those transferable skills, work with us so that we are presented in a specific way for the hiring manager. And so that bias and that prejudice, it's hurting us. And it's not, like I mentioned earlier, it's not that we can't do the job, but if we don't have hypothetically Oracle or Salesforce or you name it, validating our expertise, we don't even make it to the phone screen. So that's one point. And then to your other point, Nikki, if the company that you apply to work for is not a mission-driven company in 2020, I advise you not to apply for it. When a company is mission-driven, you can put pressure on executives to say, you need to walk the walk because apparently you walk the talk. So that's my opinion on that piece.
So here's why I asked that question, and I'm glad that you said that. A few months ago, myself and the rest of the SDR Defenders team put out a document, and it was 10 questions that every SDR should ask in an interview. And the spirit of those questions was to avoid joining a toxic sales culture, because I have had a broken picker. I have definitely failed to properly vet organizations. And on that document, and I was instrumental in writing this document, we did not have a question about asking these leaders in this interview who you're going to work for, what they're doing to build diverse and inclusive teams. And so when I posted this, a lot of folks were sort of chiming in, and a few folks said, hey, that's a question I would add. And when I thought to myself about why I didn't ask that question, I knew that it was because I don't ask that question in job interviews. I hadn't up until this point. And that's because I was afraid that it would single me out as a troublemaker. I was afraid that if I spoke too passionately, or even just advocated for myself in the smallest way as a Black woman, that they would conclude that I wasn't worth it. And that's not necessarily a self-esteem issue. It's definitely just reflective of the fact that, well, there aren't any other Black women, so it must be that they see us as more of a risk, and there's documentation to support that fact. So 2 questions. How do you guys handle that question? Or do you even ask it? And otherwise, to Chantel's point, what are the ways that Black and brown individuals, underrepresented individuals, can vet an organization in the interview process to see what they are doing?
Nikki, can you repeat the question specifically? Sorry about that. I'll get one more time.
Yeah. How can we, as underrepresented groups, vet organizations during the interview process to figure out how serious they are about diversity and inclusion? Is that even possible?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would go right out and say, do you have a diversity inclusion staff, or person who handles all the responsibilities, and does that person report to the CEO? That would probably be my first question, because more often than not, especially working in startups, you become the voice of all Black people, you become the ERG, you become the person who manages the ERG, all of the burden and responsibilities fall on you. I saw something that was really interesting recently in the light of Black Lives Matter. There was a company, JustWorks, that actually is positioning to pay ERG leads for their work. So I would also ask what kind of not commission, but compensation structure is intact for ERG leaders, because I do believe companies like JustWorks and other startups that are quite nimble are paving the way for finally compensating Black and brown people for the additional work they do.
Yeah, I want to add a few things to this particular question, because one, I think obviously it's important as a minority, person of color in this case, to bring these up in interviews and any conversations that you have before you join a company. Second to that is, ask current and ex-employees what their experience has been like, because you get a completely different picture, because as a company, you're going to put out the best picture that you can possibly paint for the person who's applying for this job. So because as a recruiter, that's your job, you want to get that person in. But your job, looking for a job, your responsibility looking for a job is to vet the employees as well. So reach out to people. If you're in sales, reach out to other people who are still at the company working in the same organization, or look for ex-employees and then ask them what their experience has been like, and make sure that you ask a diverse pool of people, not just going to the same type of people. So that's number one, what I would do if I was in that position. What was the other thing we talked about here? I'm going to pause there because there was something else, a big point I wanted to make, but I can't recall it right now.
Well, can I ask you, Galem, do you ask that question? Have you asked that question in every interview that you've gone on?
So before I joined Flywire officially, I had an interview with an employee. I had to go through like 4 rounds of talking with different people. And one of them, he asked me first before I get a chance to ask him. He said, what do you think about the diversity here at Flywire? Like just being in the office, and I was in Boston at the time. And that was a pivotal moment because I could have been safe, saying like, oh, everything's good, no problem here, never thought about it, not an issue. Or I could have just been real. And of course, I went with the latter. I was real about it. And I said, there's not enough diversity here, and that's a problem to me. I want to change that. So if I'm going to work for this company, that's going to be one of my priorities, other than obviously getting my sales done. But my other, priority here is going to help to increase the diversity because I don't like it. I walked around that office in Boston, and I didn't see anyone else but the person who was interviewing me, who's a Black male. It's the only other person of color. And I did not like that. I did not feel comfortable with that. And I'm also a person who grew up in a country in Sweden where I was born and raised with just white people. So it's not like I was uncomfortable with it, but I wasn't okay with it.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Blake?
Yeah. I want to speak really quickly to those that are hiring and those that are in leadership positions. Very simply, diversity is not some just nice thing to do. It's not something that you should do as a marketing ploy. Oh, we're diverse. Diversity makes your company better. Diversity improves your bottom line. If you were hiring for any position in your company, would you only hire and pick 3 people to choose from? No, you would want as many people to choose from as possible. So why would you not take that same mindset and apply it across your company, across race, gender, ethnicity, sexual orientation? Why wouldn't you do that? So I just wanted to say that first. Diversity is not just something that, is a throwaway. But I would ask, as I mentioned earlier, sales is uniquely human. And if you can ask great questions, you can get great answers. So I would ask a series of questions. Maybe you don't feel that comfortable to do that. I understand that, but this is what I would go through. First, I'd ask, why do you as an organization care about diversity? And I'd love to hear something akin to what I just said. We want to be better. We know that there's talented people out there that are underrepresented in this field. We want to have that edge. We want to tap into that market and be better. Okay, cool. What's next for your company? What initiatives are on the agenda? What are you going to do to advance that? Because the first thing, it shows a plan. The second question shows intention. But the next one is, where are you headed? That shows ambition. That shows that where you're at is not satisfying you. You're not content with your diversity initiatives, just like you wouldn't be content with your revenue goals, right? So that last one shows ambition. And then finally, how do you plan on making people comfortable? Because you can bring all sorts of diverse candidates through the door. And if you don't have a plan in place to make those individuals comfortable, you're going to have a retention problem. And that is a waste of money for every company, no matter the race, religion, ethnicity, background, sexual orientation. It doesn't matter. If people are coming through your door and leaving just as quickly as they got there, you are going to fail as a company. So you have to have diversity as a mindset of, this helps our company. You have to have representation. You have to have a place where people feel comfortable being themselves and succeeding in that environment.
So, and I want to get to you, Chantel, but I really quick, I'm hearing myself in the speaker. I have to say something about this business case. Here's what bothers me about it, right? I understand it is absolutely necessary to make the business case given where we are right now, because folks aren't responding to anything else. But we're not asking people to make a business case for hiring white dudes out of college. We don't even make an ROI case for that. So if we were to dig into why is that seen as less of a risk to you as an individual or to this group of people who have been in these positions hiring, then I think we start to find what we talked about at the top, right? We start to find systemic racism. We start to find stereotypes and white supremacy. And those are the things that I think a lot of the time talking about the business case helps people avoid. So yes, we make that point because that is what people respond to in the short term. But in the long term, we've got to get beyond that. In the long term, we've got to start talking about how what we do with the people that we spend upwards of 8 hours a day with is going to affect the world outside. That is how I see it. Because of what you talked about, Blake, because of the skill set of salespeople, our capacity to believe that we can save the world, change the world is what we do. You go in and somebody tells you about a new piece of software at a startup and you drink the Kool-Aid and you're like, yeah, we're going to go change the world. So salespeople, all that's in our DNA. I want to make that appeal. When I speak to people on this matter, that is what I want to get out of them, because I think that this business case is still so soaked in white supremacy. I have felt, even by people who have hired me, that this is a person who sees me as inherently a more risky choice, either because I'm Black or because I'm a woman or because of both. And when we talk about the ROI case, we reinforce that and we let it happen. So Chantel, you said some things earlier though about the business case. I do agree with what you said, and I wanted to know if you have anything to add on this particular question.
So I love your point, Nikki. It's so true. I would say Rosanna Dorothy, who leads diversity inclusion for LinkedIn globally, made a point a couple weeks ago. Let's flip the business case on its head and talk about what happens if we don't diversify. So you have a team of all white men, maybe they graduated from the same college or very similar types of colleges. They have the same strengths and they also have the same weaknesses. So it doesn't take a lot for someone to figure out that all of the account executives at company A don't know how to do values-based selling, don't know how to understand financial reports. They all don't understand it. And now the company's reputation is there's a bunch of inexperienced, homogenous white men that work at this company. And, we're not having a really conducive sales experience. Versus if you have a diverse group of people who work on the same sales team, it's a little harder to figure them out. Iron sharpens iron. They're all learning from each other. They all have different experiences. And now you've got a functional sales team that, because of their variety of experiences, are winning. So I understand, I hear you. We don't want to make a business case just because we shouldn't have to. But what if we don't? What will happen with these companies in the future? What will happen with their sales? And what will happen with those really hard metrics?
You're right. It's imperative. We have to do it. Well, we have to be having these conversations too. Go ahead, Blake.
Let's kind of double dutch my way back into this conversation. So first of all, just say I love the three of you and I'm so grateful to be on here. And I want to push back a little bit because I don't think this is going to be a productive conversation if we just nod and agree for an hour. So first of all, respectfully, I understand what you're saying, Nikki. I do. For the sake of this dialogue, I'm going to push back a bit. We don't make the business case for hiring white dudes, like putting that in quotations, literally, but we make the business case for hiring anybody. And when I say diversity helps your company, what I'm more so doing with that is I'm trying to get people to understand that diversity is not a pet project. It's not an ancillary thing to your company. It is a priority. And you should filter everything you do through diversity. Because as you just said, Chantel, to that other question of what happens if we don't? What happens if we do have an homogenization of our workforce? Well, you're going to falter because diversity helps your bottom line. And so I don't think it's about Black people proving their worth. And I think it's just helping people get in the mindset of, oh, this isn't a pet project. This is something that we should put our diversity lenses on and make business decisions. Is what I'm trying to get. I don't know if that makes sense.
I see. Yeah. So that I see that I feel the same way, by the way, about SDRs, right? Like if we're judging the organization or the profession by how we treat these individuals, how successful we can make these individuals, then we can surmise from that these other areas will continue to be successful because we're building leaders to put into those positions. It sounds like that's what you're saying with diversity, right? So if we pay closer attention to giving broader access, because that's just what needs to happen. That's the spirit of competition, which sales is a lot of times built on. If we do that, then it will create these types of changes organically that we're looking for. So we go after that part first. I feel that. Thank you. You have something to say, Galem?
Yeah, I wanted to add a little bit to this, that I can imagine, I don't know everyone who's here and where everyone's from, but I can imagine and I know that a lot of people have asked, what can I do? You know, how can I help? And those are really good questions. And my point with all of this is that this isn't just our problem as Black sales professionals. This is also your problem. If you truly want to change and help make a difference, you also have to have tough conversations with people. You also have to, as a white person, go to your leadership team and tell them this isn't diverse enough for me. You know, I would like to see something different here. And when you are in those interview, stages, you also have to have those conversations if you truly want to help. So this isn't just for us as Black sales professionals. This is for everyone to care as deeply as we do about this issue, to be a good ally, to speak up when there's no Black person in the room, because you stand behind that and you truly want to take action.
I want to give everybody a chance before we start to wrap up here in a minute. If you're out there in attendee land and you have not yet taken the poll, please do so now so that we can have time to talk about it before we're done here. Now I want to go ahead and get into some steps that people can take today to start themselves on the road to correcting this problem. And I'm asking this question specifically when it comes to folks in positions of power and influence over who is getting hired, over what programs get funded, and things of that nature. We will start with you, Chantel.
Can you repeat the question? So it's about programs that get funded versus programs that don't?
No, it's a more broad question about what steps sales leaders in particular can take to make sure that they're on this path to building a more diverse and inclusive team.
Got it. So as we all know, there has been an outpour of anti-Black resources. A lot of what's been going on before this outpour of anti-Black resources has been a manager sits down with you and wants you to explain the full history of America, systemic racism, and I have to put on a PhD hat, which I don't have, and try and get into the nitty-gritty all while rehashing trauma. I don't think there's an excuse for that anymore. There are resources everywhere. Get educated, because if there are diverse people on your team, you owe it to them to know about where they come from and their struggles and where they're going. So I think for right now, if a sales leader is looking to retain, to your point, Blake, the Black and brown people on their team, having an earnest and authentic conversation after being well read on the particular subject is the best way. We all carry that huge emotional burden all the time. I am able to talk about systemic racism as if it's an elevator pitch. I should not be able, that should not be my thing. I mean, and so let's reverse that. Let's put the responsibility on our corporate leaders, our tech leaders, our B2B leaders to do some research on America and then come back to us with their insight.
I like it. Galem?
What can they do? Communication, of course, like Chantel just talked about, that's number one. But I think a lot of the times, if it's not coming, like you mentioned, from a genuine place, then it's not going to be able to have a productive, honest, open conversation and really change much. So I think it goes back to, are you working with the right people? Are you working with those who truly do care about this and they acknowledge that they have a level of privilege that you do not have? That's the first thing for me, at least. It's just acknowledging what's on the table, and then make sure that you're talking with people who you trust and that generally do want to help and care.
Okay, Blake?
Can you repeat the question again? Sorry about that. Just want to make sure I'm answering the right thing.
Yeah, no, it's a question I've been getting for the past month, right? Which is, if I'm a leader in a position of power or influence, what can I do right now to, start to address this or fix this problem? The problem of the lack of diversity in tech and in sales, and the problem of a lack of inclusion and belonging once we do get people of color in those roles.
Okay, so I had short-lived stint as a podcast host a few years back. I might bring it back, but in that podcast, I talked about leadership at 3 levels. I talked about leadership at the character level, so what we do, who we are, how we think and behave. Talked about it from the community level, so how we interact with the people around us, those that we can touch and see and feel, and then how we lead at the cultural level, where we start making an impact, affecting society, leaving a legacy. And so what I would say to them is, first and foremost, you have to check your character. You have to, as Chantel said, do the work to understand the depth and complexity of this issue, because it is not as simple as get more people in the door. It is so much deeper than that. And if you try and solve the problem of get more people in the door, I promise you, you will have another problem of why are so many people leaving out the door? Okay, so you have to go deep. Community, then you start to ask yourself, how do we believe in diversity as a company? How do we promote diversity as a company? Once I know enough and I start inviting people into these doors, how can I make sure that they want to stay in the room, right? Lastly, culture. So I've checked myself. I've done the research. I've gone deep on this topic. I have changed and transformed my community, the people that I can touch, feel, and see in my immediate sphere of influence. How is my company having a cultural impact? Do we pursue diverse customers? Do we advocate for diversity issues beyond our industry? Do we partner with other organizations in other industries to make sure that we are a leading voice on these topics? So it goes from small to big, and it works in kind of that concentric way. Mm-hmm. So you have to do that work for yourself. You have to change the things around you, and then you can start to address culture and the things outside of your purview.
Right. And then it's happening in a more genuine and organic way, right? And not as some initiative or some checkbox. Guys, I had a bunch of other questions. I'm starting to get nervous that we won't get to them.
It's like a rapid fire thing. It's a quick answer, quick question, quick answer.
I know. So I want to talk about this. Okay, one quick rapid question, because I'm just curious. What do you, in 2 sentences, what do you think / feel when a company that lacks diversity, if you've been on such a team, encourages you to bring your whole self to work? What does that mean to you? Do you think that this is genuine? Do you think that's possible for Black people in the workplace? I see your facial expression, Chantel. Go ahead. Go ahead and jump
in. It's hard to answer that question because for me, it happened in phases. So like I have been selling for about 8 years. So when I first started selling, like I told you before, I confined to the norms. Now I'm much more comfortable in my skin. I know what I can produce. You know, I guess in a quick sentence, sales is meritocracy. It doesn't matter how I look like, doesn't matter what I, say, or if I come across too Black or whatever. If I'm producing, if I'm hitting my numbers, I don't really feel like we should be having a discussion about my Blackness. So I think that's what I've discovered from selling for so long.
I love that. I love that answer. Galem?
Yeah, I was just thinking back on an experience I had years ago when I was looking for like my first or second internship. I can't recall. But to answer your question, no, I could not bring my whole self to the table because I showed up literally to the table of this interview, completely being myself and comfortable with the fact that, I had makeup on, I had my nails done, I had braids, I had whatever I wanted, right? And I showed up. And these 2 ladies at this very big company, they just looked me up and down. And that's the moment I knew, oh, if I want to be in corporate America, I'm not going to be able to bring what I want to the table. The way I look, it's just not going to work because I'm not going to get these opportunities. So obviously I didn't get that internship, and I actually didn't even want it at the end of that because of how they made me feel. But what happened afterwards, that's the more challenging part, because what happened after that was that I never did my hair again that way, because I knew if I do, then people are not going to invite me. They're not going to give me the chances that I need in order to succeed. So yeah, to answer your question, I think it's really, really hard sometimes to bring your whole self. For me, I have to sort of compartmentalize these things and give it, depending on the context of it. So that's my answer.
Thank you for that. I can relate. Go ahead, Blake.
I'll be brief. Maybe I'll go 3 sentences though instead of 2. The short answer is no. I cannot do that currently, or not currently, but I could not do that at previous places. If I'm the only black male in a company of 70 people, it's going to be hard to feel comfortable doing that. And if I haven't seen any people of color get promoted, it's also going to be hard to do that. But I think that the whole premise of the question is wrong. Bring your whole self to work. It puts the onus on the candidate, the person, the employee. You're one person. What about you? If I bring my whole self, what are you going to do? How are you going to receive me? So I think it's more so the statement should be, we receive your whole self at this place. Because then that's a different mindset. I can bring my whole self, but if you don't accept that, then what good is that? I need to put a mask on to be here, and you know that as well as I do. But if you're saying we accept your whole self, that means that you are going to change to fit the people that are coming into your doors. It's your party. It ain't a potluck. Don't tell people to bring the food. You cook the food. You put the bunting up and you take care of everything because it's your party. It's your company. Don't tell me to come set it up when I get there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. That goes into what I think it was Kevin Dorsey that first started talking about it, is this attraction problem. The language you just used, Blake, in a job description or in this case for why you should work here on their built-in San Fran page or something, saying something like, we welcome your entire self. That is so powerful, and it is such an important distinction between simply asking someone. So that's exactly what I was getting at with that question. Thank you so much. I do, before I start to run the credits here, want to talk about the poll. And the poll is a question: how well do you think your current sales org is set up to enable Black sales pros? We've got 7% of you saying that you think it's very well set up to do so. So lucky you guys. I'd be interested to hear how y'all are getting that done. 25% of people saying somewhat, 32% saying very little, and the majority of people with 34.3% saying not at all. So clearly, we've got work to do. We have talked about what those first steps need to be, and I think that the 4 of us as a panel are in agreement that it needs to be with the folks who are asking the question, doing the work themselves, and certainly not enlisting free labor from their Black and brown employees to do this for them. So I'll go ahead and let each of the 3 of you say one more thing before we say goodbye. Thank you all. Thank you, Galem. Thank you, Chantel. Thank you, Blake. You were all brilliant. You were all handpicked for this conversation. And I made the best choice. So thank you for that. And we will start with you, Chantel, on the poll and anything you have to say to close.
Well, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to be on this panel. It's been great sharing the stage with you 3. I would say that this poll is just exposing what's going on right now in our industry, some of which is not necessarily new information, but with the information coming from this panel, and like I mentioned, the other support and resources right now that are accessible for everyone, I think we can raise our expectations and be very cognizant and mindful of what's going to happen next, specifically in this upcoming quarter. So back to my point about aligning with a company that is mission driven, now is the time to also arm yourselves to ask the right question now that the pressure is on. And I can't leave without a shameless plug to follow Sisters in Sales and support us. And we are doing a summit September 18th, where we will be highlighting Black and brown sales leaders and getting into that work. So thank you again for having me on the panel.
Go ahead, Blake. We're 1 minute. I'm so sorry. You guys.
I'll go quickly then.
Go ahead.
So my not so shameless plug, because I'm very proud of this organization, and I will always mention them. If you or anyone you know is looking to make a move into sales or pivot within their sales career, please hit me up. Hit up victorylap.io. We're here to help you. the last thing I want to say might not seem relevant, but you can take it how you want it. I just want to share this concept that's really been resonating with people. And it's this concept called the gratitude gap. And what I'm finding is that a lot of people, particularly in startup sales, are frustrated, not just by the current social climate, but by the everyday realities that they face. And when I went through my own frustrations at a previous company, I found that the people that were frustrated around me were frustrated because their entitlement, the things they felt they were owed, that they deserved, had exceeded what they were grateful for. And we always are in control of our own emotions, our thoughts, ambitions. And so we can choose to put our gratitude ahead of our entitlement. And the gap between your gratitude and your entitlement will determine your happiness. And if that entitlement gets above your gratitude, that determines your frustration. The last thing is, with entitlement, you lose twice. You're frustrated about what you have. You're frustrated about what you've yet to receive. Gratitude, you appreciate what you have, and you're grateful for what is to come. Now, that doesn't mean don't fight for more. That doesn't mean hold yourself to a higher standard. What it means is you can always choose to be grateful for what you have. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you, Blake.
I want to leave with two things: action and accountability. Those are the two most important things right now. Make sure you take the right actions and make sure you hold yourself and others accountable. If anyone wants to continue this conversation, I'm happy to do that one-on-one. Find me on LinkedIn. Be a part of Rev Genius community. We're all about taking the right actions towards the direction that we all want to go to. So thank you, Nikki, for choosing us to be part of this panel. I'm honored. I love you, and thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you all so much. Thank you again to Casey and Ashley and Other Side of Sales for lending their platform to this. Thank you to our sponsors, VanillaSoft, for those some 80-something of you that are still in here. Now's the time. Go ahead and please do donate to the 7Cs Foundation. They are doing great work for disadvantaged youth Black youth in North Florida. And please do post about this in hashtag selling while Black. I think we'll do this again. I don't know when, but thank you all for coming. And yeah, find me on LinkedIn if you want to continue the conversation.
Thanks so much, y'all.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.